Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AI Interconnect Podcast, where we speak with the founders, operators, and experts shaping how real estate and technology intersect. I'm your host, Lauren, and today I'm joined by Briant Carcamo,
You
founder
got
and
it.
CEO. Yeah, founder and CEO of Vizibly, platform helping real estate teams rethink budgeting and forecasting, and especially in the multifamily space. Brian, welcome and great to have you here.
Laurent, thanks for having me.
Okay, I say it right. Brian or Bryant and
Yeah,
Carcamo.
Briant Carcamo. That's right.
Carcamo, yeah. That's going to be a great conversation. And right now we are talking to Panama,
That's
and
right.
the company is in San Francisco. But let's dive right in. Brian, let's start with your story. You have worked across finance, strategy, and operation. What led you to launch Visibly?
Yeah, that's a great question. My background, I used to work in multifamily for about 10 years, and my role in multifamily was to be basically like a quantitative analyst. I was responsible for financial projections, quantitative analysis. I had to do all of the rents for a portfolio that had about 30,000 units. And, after doing that for almost 10 years, I really spent about 10,000 hours just living in Excel, producing budgets and financial forecasts for the portfolio. And so after I think like a decade of learning how to do this, at scale, at the scale that we have with the multifamily properties, I really thought that I started to see like a really big trend and like a pattern and what makes a good deal good and what makes a bad deal bad. And what I realized was that it really starts with assumptions. This real pain wasn't just like in the spreadsheets. And what I realized was that most bad deals don't start on site. They start with bad assumptions that happen during the underwriting process, bad assumptions that happen when you actually go and start operating the real estate. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a solution that helps solve some of that pain to really understand, hey, when we're looking at a multifamily property deal, what makes it real? What's challenging about it? How can we create a better financial plan? And what's actually going to hold up in the real world? And so about 4 years ago, decided to start Vizibly, which is a budgeting and financial forecasting platform specifically built for multifamily property managers and asset managers.
That's great. I love it, and that it came right from your specialty. I mean, you were into it for 10 years, 10,000 hours of spreadsheets.
Hmm.
Yeah, then a quant. Ah, you're a quant. Okay, that's
Yeah.
you were a quant.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Okay, then. Okay, let's start. Wait, for those who don't know Visibly yet, how would you describe what the platform does exactly?
Yeah. So what Visibly does is if you are a large property manager, you have 5, 10, 20,000 units, and you have to create forecasts and financial projections, Visibly helps large property managers basically by connecting all of the data, the people into one collaborative space to be able to produce a financial forecast for this year and the following year. And so these business plans property managers use to make strategic decisions about the portfolio. Asset managers make decisions as to whether they're going to buy, sell, refinance. And then ultimately, we use those business plans to operationalize that and get performance out of the properties. Because ultimately, when you're looking at an investment deal like a multifamily property, you want to make sure that it's going to hit the returns that you expect it to hit. But oftentimes, what happens is when you first buy the deal, you put together like a very simplistic plan, right? Like you assume, hey, the rent is just going to go up and up and up and up in this straight line fashion forever. We're going to get this occupancy. Here's what the expenses are going to be. But when you get that deal and you actually give this to the operating team, that's when the teams don't get the memo, right? And this is where like you start to see a really big disconnect between what you underwrote and what is actually happening on site. And so for property management teams, sometimes they get stuck with these bad deals, right? Sometimes they get stuck with deals that they just have to make work. And what we want to do is we want to don't just have them make it work, but rather getting them to a place where it just works. And so they can put together financial plans. They can have conversations with asset managers about the financial performance. And we do it all on one platform that's very easy to use. So that way, a property manager doesn't have to be someone like me, like a financial analyst, a quantitative analyst, to be able to explain how their operating strategy is going to actually translate into financial performance. And so Visibly brings all of that together for them.
I love it. Very, very interesting. Then how does, and I mean, maybe you just answer it, but how does Visibly solve budgeting and forecasting challenges in multifamily real estate?
That's a great question. So, one of the biggest challenges that large property managers have today is this problem of scale, right? They have many, many properties. When you have, when you get to like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 units, right, under management, you really start to scale up like the number of properties that you need to manage, right? So, you start getting into like the 10s, the 20s, the 30s. When you have 5 or 6 properties, you can do this in Excel. It's not that challenging. You can get someone to do this for you, right? But when you start getting to like 100, 200 properties, this is when you start to see all of the bottlenecks in your operations, right? And so the challenge for large property managers is that one, they need to give every asset individualized attention because real estate is hyper local, right? Like what's happening on this corner block is not going to be the same that's happening 10 minutes away with like a deal that's next to, let's say, a really great school, right? Or like a deal that's maybe like in the financial center, right? And so you have to really be very specific and granular about the real estate. And so all of your data problems just compound over time, right? And so for organizations that don't do this properly, suddenly when you start growing, which is good for the property management company to manage more assets and collect more fees, now every year you're starting to get more and more stuck in a very drawn out financial planning process. And so that I would say that's the biggest challenge that property managers have today when they scale, that getting all the data to just like work together into one cohesive place can be a very daunting task for a property manager, even an asset manager who has like distributed, property managers throughout the country. And so at the institutional level, companies need to do, I think, a better job of building systems that allow them to have more concise business plans and financial projections for asset managers. Because ultimately, asset managers need great financial projections to hold the property managers accountable, right? Ultimately, the business plan, the budget, this is going to be what you measure performance against. This is how they make decisions whether the deal is going south, whether the deal's going really well, whether we think that there's going to be a repositioning or a selling opportunity in the next 12 to 18 months. And so the budgets really, really matter. And so the key here is to have a system that is like hyper local, but also allows you to have power tools at scale. So if you need to push, let's say, big assumptions, here's what the occupancy needs to be, or here's what the rent growth needs to be for the portfolio, that one person at the company can do that without having to go into every spreadsheet and open them up, right? And so Visibly gives them tools to be able to do this at the largest scales. And so today we work with pretty large property managers.
Unbelievable, awesome. And what makes your approach different from traditional tools or other generic financial software?
Yeah, that's a great question. Today, I think the landscape is that most financial planning products are built for financial analysts, for the finance team, right? For the FP&A team. But in multifamily, what happens is we can come up with all the great assumptions at the corporate office, but you still need local input. You still need property managers on the ground who know every single permit, every single license, what's going on with these residents, right? These are folks who really know their communities very, very well. The challenge is that in today's technology environment, we've given them so much technology that the property management role has started to become very, very narrow, right? Like it's become more and more specialized over time because now you have so many tools that will take care of your leasing, the accounting, right? Other aspects of the business. When in the past, a property manager was like a mini CEO of their community, right? They used to have their hands in every piece of the business, right? And if you think of an apartment building, there's like a leasing angle, there's a maintenance angle, there's obviously like a financial angle. And so what's happening now is we see that there's starting to be a bigger and bigger gap in the financial and business acumen of the on-site team members, right? The community managers, even to the regional manager level. And so we have this challenge where we need to produce these like very important financial documents, these business plans for the communities, but the folks who do it are not technical. They need a lot of help. And so we create the system in such a way that it walks them through a step-by-step workflow to get through the budget. And so they literally can go into Vizibly, almost like it'll ask them questions. It'll show them things on the screen that ask them, hey, what's your rent growth going to be? What do you think about this expense? How do you want to model this assumption? And so someone at the corporate office can like pre-fill and configure the financial model. But then the community manager, when they do it, follows just a very simple process that walks them through the whole thing in a really concise and consistent way. And so that's on the data entry part. Then the next part comes in actually selling the budget to ownership, right? Like let's say you're an asset manager, you're expecting the business plan for next year, right, from your property manager. And so the way that it's done today is a lot of folks just send you a spreadsheet. And so you get the spreadsheet, you have no idea how any of the numbers came together. Like, how did you come up with this number, this occupancy projection? And so you need all the backup, right? And so what happens is right before like the end of the year, every asset manager today is messaging their property manager, asking them for the backup. And this just sucks up all of their time, right? This is what kills the fourth quarter, just trying to get through this approvals process. And ultimately what you want is you don't want the property manager doing this. You want the property manager doing what they do best, which is leasing the apartments, taking care of the residents, making sure that it works very well together. And so we can obviously expect that there's going to be some work to them, but the state of getting through an approvals process for budgeting today is very, very challenging, especially when the market is down, right? When you've got a very tight market, you're going to be counting every penny, and this can be very, very challenging for property managers. And so what Vizibly does is we take all of their assumptions and we actually write out in plain English the story, right? We give them the story, what NOI is going to be doing, what are all the different rent assumptions you're going to be projecting for next year. And then we give the asset manager a very curated view of the budget where they can inspect, they can do all of the self-service without having to ping the property manager. And then we also give them collaboration tools to be able to chat and comment back and forth on the budget. And so that's how you really get through an efficient and effective budget approvals process. And so with Vizibly, we think that there's always going to be a healthy tension between asset managers and property managers. And so we want to bring those two together because we think that that's a function that's actually something that's healthy. Having healthy friction is good. In organizations who don't have enough pushback, that's a sign that there's over optimism and unrealistic expectations. And so Vizibly sets out to solve that.
Yeah, sounds very logical, but I want to ask you, can you walk us through a typical case study from the chaos in spreadsheet to the clarity through Vizibly? Maybe something.
Yeah, certainly. I can give you a couple of examples.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
we recently worked with a company called Asset Living. They're a very large property manager, and they were coming off of an Excel template. And some of the challenges that they had was that they were spending tens of hours per property just getting the template set up, getting them saved to SharePoint, syndicating them out to all the property managers. And so when we did a study, they were spending thousands of hours at an organization level to get through the budget approvals process. And so what we did was we immediately replaced just having to create financial templates. And so that helped to accelerate the data pipeline and get people budgeting really, really early. And so what was really nice for them was that they used to start their budget process in June and July, but because we're able to integrate all the data, the tool is really easy to use, and you can get through an approvals process really efficiently, they were actually able to move up their budget process. And so now they start their budget process in September and in October. And so that's really beneficial for them because that means that they have less months to forecast in the future. And so they can be really, really close to the actuals, by the time that they have to actually start operating the properties. And so moving up the timeline is really, really beneficial because when you start too early, it's pretty hard to do like an 18, 24-month projection, but it's a lot easier to make a 12-month projection that's going to hit the number if you got the freshest data. And so that's what we allowed them to do. Other examples that I have is, sometimes when people start a property management company, you only have, 1, 2, 3 people because you're trying to get a certain critical mass of units where the management fees are able to cover the staff that you have at the corporate level, right? And so a lot of times it's pretty bare bones. It's like you've got, the president, you've got maybe like one regional manager, you've got like one accountant. And so it can be a pretty scrappy team that has to suddenly start, managing the properties, right? Like you're literally trying to get more business, right? And over time you get more business so that you can hire more people at the corporate office. And so what we see is when you've got like small property management companies that are up and coming, maybe they have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 units, they don't have a financial planning team to be able to just take over all of the budgets. And so they run into a really tricky situation where, they obviously want to grow, right? Because they need the management fees to continue funding the operations. But the more they grow, the more challenging the problem becomes, right? Because now the president has to do the budget. And that's the most expensive person, right? Like we don't want the president focused on the mechanics of putting a budget together. We want her on the strategic analysis of like whether this is going to be a good projection or not. And so what's been really great about working with, smaller property managers is that we really see them leverage Vizibly where, man, one, two, three people can just do 20, 30 budgets, within just a few hours, right, per budget. And so that's been a really great story to see because, as someone who's an entrepreneur and understands the challenges of actually like starting a company and how much you have to work to get the volume of work out, it's really gratifying to see those young entrepreneurs out there starting property management companies, how they can leverage Vizibly to not let budgeting be something that holds them back in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's I love the story. Yeah, no, I mean, then let's talk about what you're seeing across the market. What are some of the biggest operation pain points that a property management teams and asset manager are dealing with?
Yeah, right now the market we're at a really interesting time in the curve. Essentially what's happening is, over the last 3 or 4 years, we had interest rates increase on a lot of the financing for the multifamily deals. And what happened is because we had such a long period of everything was amazing, multifamily was going up, a lot of the deals got over leveraged, they got over financed, and now owners got stuck with pretty bad loans that don't really make the deals work. And so what that means is that there's a ton of pressure on property managers today to just make it work. And so a lot of folks complain about, look, like we can do all of the magic on rents and occupancy and build these communities and cut all the expenses, but sometimes you really just can't get out of the deal. And so property managers are facing, I think, a pretty challenging operational situation that is still working itself out, right? As the deals start to turn and new financing comes in place, I think that's probably still something that's going to be happening a little bit more. And so property managers have to stay very vigilant and they have to be very direct and explicit about the things they can do to make the properties work and the things they can't do. And so this is where Vizibly really helps. Having a financial projection gives them tools to be able to push back against ownership. Other things that we're seeing in some markets are that because the market was so good, they started building a lot of buildings in certain key markets, Denver, Phoenix. And so what happens is when you build a lot of supply, right, the demand basically starts to push rents down, right? And so a lot of these markets are still fighting lower rent growth. And that doesn't really line up with a pro forma and underwriting model that just assumes that the rents are going to be going up and up and up in this linear fashion. That doesn't happen, right? And so a lot of folks in certain key markets still have quite a bit of pain to get the properties to perform because the market is in a really kind of interesting situation. Now, that's not in every market. Some markets are doing better than others. The Midwest is doing really well. And so I think if you're like a national property management company, it's really about finding owners where you can like position yourself to take advantage of where the opportunities live, because all it takes is one bad deal to suddenly sink all of your operations, right, into making it work when maybe there's just no way out for an individual deal. This is where financial projection is incredibly important. And I think the folks who leverage budgeting and financial forecast are going to be the ones that have the most quantitative tools to actually together a business plan that's beneficial for ownership.
That's very, very interesting. Okay, then what are the challenges in syncing data from systems like Yardi or RealPage?
Yeah, this is an ongoing and evergreen topic
Sure.
on syncing data from Yardi and other systems. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is that there's a lot of hurdles that vendors like us have to overcome in order to be able to get the data. And the truth is that, not only do they cost money to do, you spend engineering resources to, develop a competency in each system, is that they all have, varying levels of performance and reliability that happens throughout all the systems. And there really isn't like any really great system to integrate with. You just have to do it because that's what it takes to have a software startup in the multifamily space. So what we do is we just spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time learning the ins and outs of the data pools and the data management to build that competency. It would be really great if there was a more modern API architecture for all the property management systems to pull this data. The other challenge that we see on the data side is that property management systems require a lot of maintenance and sometimes they're not very clean. So we just expect that we can do all that we can to automate, to build these data pipelines that ingest the data in the right way. But then you connect to another system and it turns out that they didn't mark these units as wait lists. And so they're overcounting the unit count, right? And so there's always going to be data cleanup and data validation issues that happen when we translate from one property management system, into our system. And so we build tools inside of the application to be able to troubleshoot those.
Yeah, yeah. When it's not clean, that's awful.
Mhm.
Then mostly, I mean, you mentioned resistance, technically the technical resistance, but could it be cultural also, or between Yardi and yourself, and I mean, herding your synchronization or API?
Definitely, they hold the keys to a lot of great success in the multifamily industry, but we certainly respect, the massive businesses that they built, and certainly it's part of their moat to have a better hold on the data. What's a really great trend, I think, is that customers are savvy. They know how this works, and actually, I would say the technical competence of customers today has definitely increased to such a point where customers can be your best advocate in helping you negotiate things with the property management system. So if there's bugs or like a support, you need a support ticket pushed through, a great customer will go through great lengths to making sure that it works. And customers are under no illusion that integrations and data issues with property management systems, work just as planned. So that's been a really great, I think, trend that, customers want best in class today, and they'll do a lot to making sure that that products like ours are able to get the information.
Okay, let's go broader. You talk about decision intelligence and not just dashboard. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, what it means to us, decision intelligence, is taking a look at how your assumptions and your forecasts are going to impact your operating strategy. You can certainly come up with all kinds of assumptions that will make the budgets look really good. But at the end of the day, you still need to operationalize the plan, right? You need to give this to your community managers in such a way that they can actually go and execute on the plan. And then whenever you're off the plan, you need to be able to change things to see whether the things that you're doing are going to have the maximum return on your investment. And so that's what we mean by decision intelligence, is that we're able to do these things invisibly so that the property managers can react to what's happening in the market rather than be victims to all the things that are happening to them.
Where does AI or smart automation fit into your roadmap?
For us, we're definitely looking at a lot of different applications for AI. We're looking at AI for ways to do the budget, but it turns out that in multifamily, the budgets are super pedantic. They're very, very granular. That there's a lot of accounts. You want to really list out all the accounts. Property managers will have hundreds of accounts that they have to budget for. And AI is not really something that's very precise. The way that they're built, it's almost like probabilistic mostly. And that does not make for very precise budgeting. And so that's definitely not a place where we saw it coming in. Where we're looking at AI is in ways to have either like companions, right, that help you through financial statement analysis, or also places where they can tell the story better to your asset manager. And so those are the places where we're exploring AI applications.
Yeah, then maybe scenario planning or detection, anomaly detection, something like this.
Yeah,
Probably
certainly
it's
there's a
working
lot of
better.
data applications. Yeah, that's right. We certainly use AI in other parts of our business, like our internal operations and our marketing efforts. Yeah, there's a really big use case for AI.
What's one system or process you would automate tomorrow if tech or adoption was not a barrier?
A system for the Visibly business, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, system for your business, yeah,
Mhm.
or process.
Yeah, one of the things that we really think a lot about is how AI is really changing the go-to-market motion. How one person really can manage a sales funnel, a marketing funnel. And so those are the things that I do a lot is just think about those mini automations, capturing leads, running ads, creating copy, all the things that are happening with N8N are really interesting how people can create kind of video and ways to maybe even replace like a marketing agency. It certainly gives, I think, companies like ours who are so scrappy, where I can run like a pretty significant like go to market channel without having to spend that much in resourcing the way you traditionally had to.
Okay, wow, very interesting. What's next for Visibly?
For us, it's really just continuing to improve the product, continuing our go-to-market motion, continue to get more market penetration. And so right now we're in the middle of budget season and finishing this up. And we're, excited to continue to provide more and more solutions to the multifamily industry. So I think that next year is going to be a pretty interesting year for the multifamily industry as we get through kind of the slump of transactions, of the markets being down. A lot of folks are expecting a pretty good 2028 as all of the supply gets absorbed. And so we want to have tools that help them, really figure out, hey, if now is the time to be optimistic, let's put a financial plan together to reflect that. And we want to build tools inside of Visibly that incorporate more of that market data.
Okay, and any upcoming partnership or feature you're excited about?
For us, all the features that we're building around are really in making the user experience better for the data entry. And so we are working on ways to make the process even simpler for property managers, because one of the trends that we're seeing is that actually the budgets are getting more and more centralized. It's really now coming down to just a handful of people at companies that are setting all of the assumptions for the portfolio. And so if we can make that experience even easier for the managers, that's something that we're building towards.
And are you seeing demand for markets outside of the US?
Most of our demand is really in the US, and we do get some in Canada as well. But the big elephant in the room is the massive multifamily, industry in the US.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's so
So
much
much,
work
so
over
much
there.
investment. Yeah, so
Yeah.
much investment here.
Okay, then how do you see Visibly's role evolving in a broader PropTech stack?
I think for us, we were really interested in building a vertical financial planning and analysis platform. We see that for very large companies, Fortune 500 companies, you can adopt like these horizontal FP&A tools that allow you to do like a little bit of BI, a little bit of financial forecasting. This is really sort of for managing global operations, but they don't really fit very well in the multifamily space because of the types of users that are going to be working in the systems. This needs to be very, very tailored to the multifamily industry that doesn't require like an army of consultants. And so I think we've done a pretty good job of solving reforecasting and the annual budgeting process, but we really want to sort of see how we can actually start getting closer and closer to asset value. So this can become like a tool for asset managers to really make buying and selling decisions off of the budgets. Today, that's also a very manual process. Today, they basically take a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, market data, they call your cousin, they find out, what's going on in a certain market. It's very, very manual. Like today, if you wanted to find out what your asset is worth, you got to call a broker. The broker creates a statement of value document for you. They try to sell you services to sell. Real estate is not liquid, right? You can't just sell it tomorrow, right? It really requires a very careful song and dance when you're actually going to go and bring this to market. And it's very relationship driven. And so we just think that there could be a more like digitally native solution to taking financial projections down to like, what is this asset really worth? And when do I want to find opportunistic times to, buy and sell my real estate, for investment purposes? And so that's kind of what we're building towards, just having a really more like a consistent, vertical FP&A tool for the multifamily industry.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And if you could go back to your first year building Visibly and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
The advice that I would give me as a young entrepreneur is to um not be anxious that maybe like it's going too slow. Like one thing that you learn a lot from, the YouTube intelligentsia on startup building, right? It's like, ship fast, have a product, get feedback, right? And so you go through this like iterative loop to go from 0 to 1. And there's definitely like sound advice, but what happened with us was that we needed to be a lot more patient about how to actually build the product. Because when it comes to budgeting, it's actually a very, very complex product. There's a lot of moving parts. And you can't just like have like if it all doesn't all work together, it doesn't really work at all. Right. It's like, so we have to solve, for example, like all the Yardi, and try to real page integration issues, bringing in all the data, creating the data model. Like that in and of itself is a whole feature set of just like bringing together and calculating all the building blocks. Then you've got the UI layer where you actually build the workflows. And there's a lot of different workflows, right? There's a workflow for calculating revenue. There's a workflow for calculating expenses. There's features for bulk updating the assumptions. You see, like there's actually like a lot of components to budgeting. And that's just to create the budget. Then you still have to go sell the budget, right? To ownership. And so that requires a reporting layer. And so I think what happened with us was that, we wanted to create a budgeting solution, but it just needed to be a lot more comprehensive before we could bring it to market. And so if you bring a product that's not really ready to market, you're going to have either low adoption or like sales won't really come in because you don't have enough features, or your customers will be unhappy and they'll churn because the product is just incomplete. And so I think for us, it really required us to really take a step back and think, do we still feel conviction in the market around budgeting? I certainly did because of my experience as someone who worked in the multifamily industry. And so it wasn't really about not having conviction, but it was about solving the real problem. Was that, oh wait, budgeting actually has to be a lot more feature complete before we can have like the adoption that we want to have. And so, that is a very, very hard lesson to learn, right? It's a hard lesson to learn when, you're spending money, when you're hiring people, when you have customers churning. Yeah, that can be a very challenging place to be as an entrepreneur because you don't know why it's not working. Is the market wrong? Is the product wrong? These are all the ups and downs that you go as an entrepreneur as you try to solve, right, the problem of why maybe you're not getting adoption in your specific product. And so I think having that patience to really get through those hurdles. The other thing that I think happened for me was that we obviously want to have a product that gets adopted, and you want to have a lot of demand for it because the demand is a signal that people like the product, right? That the product is serving a critical need. But if you do that too early and you don't focus on delivering the service to the customer, then now you're going to have churn, right? You're going to have unhappy customers who will eventually churn, and you really can't fill that hole because, every lead is so precious in the early stage, right? Literally every conversation you call 100 people to get one person to take your call, right? I mean, every customer is so precious in the early stage. And then if you have a leaky bucket, you don't have enough coming in and then you've got all of them coming out. That's a killer for the business. And so I think that the key is really finding those like pilot customers who know it's going to be a little tough, right? It's going to be a little rough. It's not really going to work that well. There's going to be a lot of features they wish the product is going to have. But through your founder magic, you convince them that stick with us because we're going to make it better. And so I think for us, it was about focusing on the customer experience and like really prioritizing customer satisfaction, customer satisfaction, customer satisfaction before we move on to the next stage, which is demand, 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 right? And so I think when you have really like this loyal fan base of people who will go through it with you because they believe in the mission, they believe in the product and the value that you're trying to bring, and you can really focus on delivering the service, maybe in an unscalable way. I'm not going to lie. People called me to my cell phone. They still text me, Briant, can you fix the data? Can you add a user? I still get those questions. That's the kind of business we are, where I'm very, very well connected to the customers. And then over time, once you feel like, hey, the product is in a good place where we can reliably deliver this service to the customer, now we can start thinking about, let's add more customers to the system, right? And so ultimately what you end up doing is, once you're kind of over that 0 to 1 stage, you can really start thinking, okay, well, how can I systematize the service? because like I can't be like available for every customer all the time, right? And so you will have to bring in customer success. You will think about like your customer support system, but don't do that too early. You know, in a lot of ways, kind of like what I try to do is I try to just be present for the stage that I'm in. You know, like, okay, this is the time when I'm just gonna know every manager. I'm gonna know every user. I'm just gonna I literally know their names, their faces, where they're from, what community they are. You know, so if you're like an early stage founder, this might be like a really challenging time for you, where you feel like nothing's working, people don't want my product. Why isn't demand coming in? But also remember that hey, if you have users, love your users, right? Like every user is so precious to you right now. So like enjoy the ride, solve the problem. But then when you get to the next stage, now the next stage is really about opening the demand funnel, right? Open demand so we can start filling up our bucket. And so that's kind of the stage where we are, you know, where we've delivered, I think, a pretty consistent customer experience to the customer today. And now it's really about like, let's really bring on more and more customers to get more market penetration.
Yeah, I mean, you went one stage up, but great advice. That's right. I mean, at the beginning, you have to do everything and by yourself. Like this, you learn everything, and you show your customer that you can do and make it happen.
Mhm.
And what's one thing you believe about building in prop tech that most people still get wrong?
I think what is interesting about prop tech is that it just impacts so many people. There's something like 10 million, 20 million residential units in the United States. Like just think about the sheer amount of people, right, that live in the communities and just like what a pillar of the economy of the industry this is, to provide housing for folks. And how much technology like actually gets into the residential side, from how you pay your rent, how you pay your utilities. Right. Yeah. It's a pretty, some might say that it's a crowded landscape because there's a lot of opportunity in prop tech. I would say that one of the challenges to like a go to market distribution, for example, especially at the enterprise level, is just how relationship driven this is. This really is a very, very tight knit community. I like to think about it as the world's largest high school. Like if you go to, let's say, there's like certain industry events where all of the owners get together, right? It's like you're still talking about 3, 4,000, maybe 5,000 individuals, who manage like all of the enterprise institutional level real estate, and so it's incredibly influential. And it's really about finding folks who are real, like I think serious owners, investors, providers of housing. I think the finding a great partner like that is going to be, I think, the key to distribution for your PropTech startup. And that can be really challenging to break through, but ultimately what's nice about multifamily is kind of how tight knit it is, and reputation is everything.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. Oh, so important. And for funders listening today, what's one trap to avoid when building tools for real estate operators?
Yeah. The trap to avoid is building too fast, it doesn't work, and then trying to get too many customers on it. That's I think the biggest challenge that folks are going to have, specifically in prop tech. If you get a bad reputation in prop tech, it's going to be hard to overcome it because it's such a small industry. So whatever you build, make sure that you build it well, right? You're very transparent with your customers, because multifamily operators or owners, they're very savvy. They've been trained over the last 10 years to be incredibly savvy with the technology. And so they can be really great partners, but they can also be people who really can inhibit your growth if you don't serve them properly. And so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, good advice. Okay, let's a quick question. One tool you cannot run your business without.
Man, we cannot run business without Slack. Slack is so good. Yes, I'm gonna go old school. Like what are the tools here? Like, man, it's so nice that you can just connect everything to Slack. You can send all your updates to Slack, right? All the AI automations that you can put into Slack. We really try to like get everything into the system. And it's actually like some of the inspirations that we think about what prop tech could look like. How easy it is to buy software as a retail consumer, where you just put in your email, everything works. There's no setup, no configuration. It'd be so nice if we could do this at the enterprise level, right? When buyers could just buy enterprise level software, and it all gets connected. And so we've got a lot of layers to build before we can get there. But man, it would be so nice if there's a way that we could just connect to all the systems. That would be another great PropTech startup, integration layers.
Yeah. And the Slack is most of the answers of my question to guests. Most of them answering Slack. Unbelievable. Um, Brian, thank you so much. Thanks again for joining. I love hearing how you are rethinking budgeting and the narrative inside real estate finance. And I really have a great time. This is very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people learn more about you and Visibly?
Yeah, you can learn more at vizibly.io. That's Vizibly.io, or find us on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we should do it again maybe in a year from now and see what you are.
Yeah, we'll love that. Thanks, Laurent.
Wonderful. Okay, and that's it for today's episode of AI Interconnect. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who is building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you.